We had a hearing on Medicare for All yesterday, which came and went without a blip. We have had no conversation about the public option, which Joe Biden campaigned on. We have this new budget, which has $30 billion additional in military spending, none of these domestic priorities, no student debt cancellation, more money for student loan servicers, $2.7 million more dollars for student loan servicers, and on down the list. There's an ongoing conversation about how this is going to affect Democrats in midterms. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez recently gave an interview where she said the Democrats are in trouble for not pursuing some of these popular agenda items. You disagreed.
In terms of the November election, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said in recent days that she thinks that the Democratic Party is in trouble because of the president. Listen to what she said.
This is really about the collapse in support among young people, among the Democratic base, feeling like they are not, that they worked overtime to get this president elected, and they aren't necessarily being seen.
Is she right?
The president has done an extraordinary job. We've passed the American Rescue Plan. We've passed infrastructure. Here's the biggest thing we ought to highlight. $20 billion Intel is investing in Ohio. You talk about the revitalization of the Midwest. We're delivering. Let's pass the CHIPS Act, get it to the president. Of course, there are other things we ought to do, but this president has met the moment in very difficult circumstances.
Americans might disagree with you. His approval rating is only 40% in the latest Reuters Ipsos poll.
All right, so Joe Biden's approval rating is 40%. There are an increasing number of independents as folks no longer want to identify with the Democratic Party. As I say frequently, if you go to the comment section of any pop culture website like the Shade Room, you'll see people still talking about how they didn't get their stimulus checks and they're waiting for student debt cancellation. Why do you think that Biden has met the moment?
Well, first of all, I participated in the Medicare hearing yesterday and pointed out that the $12,000 that American working families are paying to private health insurance and the $16,000 that American businesses are paying to private health insurance is a tax. It's the biggest tax on working families, and why we need Bernie Sanders' Medicare for All. That would be a huge tax cut for most Americans and most businesses, and would provide finally health care to everyone. So I am a 110% supporter of Medicare for All, Bernie Sanders' vision, and it's building support in the House. Obviously, we're not there, but the fact that we're having hearings, the fact that we have Jeffrey Sachs, the fact that so many people who are listening to this are advocating for it, we're making progress. Now, there are other places that I think we need to deliver. A $15 minimum wage. I wish the president would cancel student loans. I've called for that, at least do up to $10,000. I have pushed for an expansion of Medicare for dental, vision, hearing. We need a bold climate bill that still needs to pass. But when you look at also what we've done, we shouldn't diminish that. We had checks that went out under the American Rescue Plan. We passed the child tax credit that did help a lot of working families. The infrastructure bill, I still believe overall is a good thing, even though we haven't had the other part of it yet. So my view is that we ought to be talking about the things we have done. We have to also be clear about what we want to do. And the only way we're going to get to do what we want to do is to elect more Democrats. I mean, the idea that we would be hurting the party and not be unified heading into the midterms, and obviously I respect people's right to dissent, but that's not going to achieve our goals to hand over the speakership to Kevin McCarthy or to see Donald Trump return in 2024. I guess I just don't see how that helps the progressive agenda.
Why should voters believe that electing more Democrats is going to change anything? When you see, speaking of Medicare for All, what just happened in California, where an overwhelmingly Democratic legislature ultimately killed the state Medicare for All bill, despite the governor running on Medicare for All and everybody involved articulating a desire to have Medicare for All. 88% of Democrats and 50% of Republicans, overwhelming majorities of Americans support Medicare for All, but you can't get hardly 50% of Democrats in the House to back these Medicare for All bills. So why will electing more Democrats make a difference?
Well, first of all, because we've come a long way since when Sanders first ran in 2016. I mean, you got over half the House Democratic caucus on that. And at the very least, even if we don't go for Medicare for All, which I 100% support, I'm on the bill. I don't believe in diluting the Sanders bill, but at least we can start extending it, have dental, have vision, have hearing. We got close. Move Medicare to 60 to 55 We're making progress. And there are a lot of other issues. Look, the House passed a lot of these policies. The House passed $15 minimum wage. The House passed bold green energy. The House passed child care. The House passed universal preschool. We have a problem in the Senate. You don't think that if we had a few more Democratic senators, that would make a difference? Because that's really been where the block is.
I don't. Representative, have you heard of this theory of the rotating villain?
I have.
Okay. Do you subscribe to it? Do you subscribe to the idea that it's more than just Manchin and Sinema that are holdouts, and if for some reason Manchin and Sinema were to vote along with the rest of the Democrats, suddenly there wouldn't be another flank of objectors that kept things from being passed?
I think in some cases that's true. I carried interest, for example, the fact that you've even had Trump and Biden, everyone campaigns against it. We still have this carried interest exception. I'm sure there are cases like that where the lobbyists get to the person on some committee and prevent it from happening. But in a large part of the agenda, I don't think that is the case. And I don't think we ought to think it that way, because progressives I believe we're on the 10-yard line. I believe we've mobilized and won so many of the intellectual debates. What I would hate to see is people get disengaged and give up, and then to see people like Kevin McCarthy or Donald Trump come into power because voters just want change, and for us to lose all of the progressive agenda that we're working for working families and for more justice in this country. I think our only choice is to continue to organize, continue to mobilize. I don't mind people criticizing me and saying, oh, I compromised too much or should have done this or that, as long as they stay engaged and continue to build a progressive influence and continue to work to get help Democrats succeed. I think we can have internal disagreement, but disengaging is handing over power to folks who don't have that agenda at heart.
See, I would argue that what AOC is doing is not disengaging.
Well, certainly she isn't. I'm not saying that about her.
In saying what she's saying, she's not causing people to disengage. And pointing out the truth of why people are disengaged, that's not causing people to disengage. Insisting that things are good, that this is fine when the room is burning, I think that's what's causing people to disengage. And I would love to hear you opine on what you think happened in California, because certainly the argument cannot be that you just need a few more Democrats, a few more progressives elected in California, given how many people overwhelmingly, how electeds support Medicare for All.
I agree with that. I'm not going to defend what happened in California. I was a strong supporter of Ash Kalra's bill. I don't think we should have withdrawn it. I think we ought to vote, put people on record. The governor ran on single payer. He ought to deliver on single payer.
Why do you think Ash Kalra chose not to force the vote on that issue? We had him on the show and talked about it.
I have a lot of respect for Ash. I know how passionate he is on this, but I told him, and I think we should have forced a vote there. I think the governor he campaigned explicitly on single payer. It's one of the reasons I endorsed him. I stuck with him in the recall, and I made it clear over and over again, publicly and privately, that we ought to pass single payer in California. That's why I did the whole state bill of allowing states to be able to get waivers, and I am the lead of that in the House. So if I would not be saying, okay, just give us more Democrats in California. I think we have all the Democrats we need. We may need more progressives, but we have all the Democrats we need. We have a Democratic governor who ran on this. Now it's incumbent in California to do this. That's very different, though, than the situation that the President Biden has in the Senate. That is not, if we had 52, 53 senators, I think that'd be a different case. I really do. And that's why I think the president is in a place where he has adopted a large part of the progressive agenda as his agenda. And that's in thanks to Bernie Sanders. It's in thanks to Elizabeth Warren. It's in thanks to all of the activists, many of people listening to the show. And they should be proud of that.
What are the large parts of the progressive agenda that Biden has adopted as his own?
Universal child care, universal preschool, $500 billion of climate. That's not as much as I know progressives want. It would be the biggest investment in the history of this country in climate. The Medicare expansion to dental, vision, and hearing, Biden was for that.
So policies that were enacted in the short term during the pandemic, which have elapsed, a climate policy with spending levels that got Joe Biden rated an F or F minus by the Sunrise Movement during the campaign. These are what we're characterizing as Joe Biden adopting large parts of the progressive agenda?
Well, universal child care would be permanent, and as would every 3 and 4-year-old going to kindergarten or preschool. That's a big deal. And fact that the president was for Medicare having dental, vision, hearing is a big deal. I mean, the president has moved to adopt a lot of the agenda, and I guess the progressives we should continue to push for more and hold accountable, but we shouldn't be afraid to celebrate the progress we've made in changing the political debate in the last 6 years.
I have no interest in minimizing what has been accomplished, but I am troubled by the rebranding of what it means to be progressive and what the progressive agenda is to encompass the most minimalistic, basic social programs that frankly should be bedrock principles of the Republican Party if we had a genuine progressive flank in this country. And redefining progressivism in that way, I think, does the work of actually deflating what the outer limits of our political advocacy should in fact be. If we have representatives like you and AOC, not that she's doing this, but, heralding a $15 minimum wage and, universal pre-K as the bedrock, as substantive parts of the progressive agenda, while Joe Biden won't even fulfill his own campaign promises, or as the architect of the crime bill has no pressure from his black constituents without whom he would have been elected to just decriminalize marijuana, something that's overwhelmingly popular. It's hard for me to sit here and listen to the idea that he has somehow bent the knee to progressives, especially when we know that the idea that he has done so is going to be weaponized against Democrats, weaponized against progressives in the fall when we lose seats.
Well, first of all, this is why I supported a progressive for president. I mean, I wanted Bernie Sanders to be our president. Joe Biden is a moderate. I don't think he would call himself a progressive. I certainly wouldn't say that Joe Biden is
conservative.
I certainly wouldn't say, okay, Joe Biden, we have a progressive president like Bernie Sanders. But that's why I worked so hard for wanting Bernie Sanders. That's why I hope one day we do have a progressive president. But the point is, in the context of having a moderate president adopt aspects of the progressive agenda, that we should celebrate. I'm not compromising in our goals. I am for Medicare for All. I am for free public college. I am for forgiving student debt for families, for working families. I'm for making sure that we legalize marijuana, not just decriminalize marijuana. I am for making sure that we have the much stronger bargaining rights and that we have a livable wage. All of those policies are things that I am not compromising on. The difference in philosophy is I am pragmatic under the circumstances to say, can we compromise to get some win as opposed to nothing? And that can be a judgment call of how much people think that's worth doing. But it's not that I am running away in any way or diluting the broader vision of what I think is an ideal, just society.
But I would put to you, Representative, that being pragmatic means saying Joe Biden ran on 15, get him to do 15. Joe Biden ran on canceling 10,000 of student debt, get him to do that. Being pragmatic is not characterizing whatever wins that are actually less than that as progressive. And I think that is the difference, that people feel like there is a kind of propagandizing that some progressives end up doing for the status quo and allow them to get away with selling what is the bare minimum as somehow a progressive agenda. And that feels like the public, progressive and otherwise, feels like it's getting gaslit as it's being told things are fine. Joe Biden is meeting the moment when they are experiencing economic hardship, the likes of which they haven't experienced since 2008.
Well, I have called for him to eliminate the student loans over and over and over again. I led the letter and fight on the $15 wage to say we should overrule the parliamentarian and pushed the administration to do that and said we should have had that as part of the American Rescue Plan.
Why do you think he didn't? Why do you think that he hasn't canceled student debt? Given what AOC is saying is we're screwed in the fall unless you do something big. There are limited a number of options given the recalcitrance of Manchin, Sinema, and others. So he needs to use executive authority. Why do you think he's failing to do so?
I think he will. I think the Progressive Caucus has come up with some recommendations, use executive authority to lower prescription drug costs, declare a climate emergency, have bold investment in a moonshot on clean energy. I think he will take
but some not of these student debt.
Well, it's part of what we're pushing for as well. And
what are those conversations like? What does it mean to push for it?
Well, we discuss it with him in some cases, but also with the chief of staff, with the administration, the progressive.
Well, what are his objections? Are there articulated objections from him or Secretary Cardona?
Well, I think he's deferring to administration staff, and there's a difference in opinion on whether it is constitutional. We think my argument is that if you have the authority to delay student loans, you then have the authority to cancel it.
That is the argument.
There are, obviously people on his team who are advising him elsewhere, but we have to continue to push on these things. But I guess my point is the alternative. I see it all the time with some of the Republicans who want to get in charge. And I guess my view is if we are all fighting, as I genuinely am, and people may, I don't question their motives. If we're all fighting for Medicare for all, for free public college, for $15 livable wage, for bargaining rights, and we want to get to that future, having Kevin McCarthy become the speaker or having Donald Trump return in 2024 is not going to get us there. And so we also have to be balanced in saying we need this president to succeed. I really believe that. I say that as someone who worked my heart out to see that he didn't win the primary.
I think that the issue is that many of us believe that Joe Biden and the administration's pushback against things like student debt, pretending that there is some kind of legal ambiguity here, is all in bad faith. The same way that the choice to drop a $15 minimum wage and defer to an unelected parliamentarian who has no authority whatsoever was in bad faith. And the idea that we need Joe Biden to succeed falls flat when you stop trusting that he is trying to succeed, because his measure of success is not ours. His motives are different than ours, partly because he took more money from corporate interests and billionaires than anybody else in the campaign. And those are still the people that are motivating his choices, which is why student loan servicers are getting more money in this budget. And student debtors, the 44 million Americans who are in the middle of an economic crisis and a jobs crisis and a housing crisis and a health crisis, aren't getting those same kind of breaks. Hey, YouTube, thanks for watching. Just a reminder that this is a podcast. You can catch an extra premium episode every Monday for $5 a month at patreon.com/badfaithpodcast. That's patreon.com/badfaithpodcast for $5 a month, an extra episode every week. Additionally, please do consider liking this video, subscribing to this channel. It helps us out. It helps independent media beat the algorithm. We appreciate you. And as always, keep the faith.